Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Suffering for Art podcast. I am your host, Brianna Kaleen, and exciting news, today's episode is brought to you by Salt River Therapy. If you've been feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or just not quite like yourself lately, you don't have to figure it out alone. Salt River offers therapy for individuals and couples in person in Brooklyn and virtually across New York and New Jersey. You can even schedule a free consultation to see if it's the right fit. No pressure. Just a chance to connect. Visit saltrivertherapy.com to learn more. Today's topic of conversation is grief. And I know many of you just went, whoa, that's a lot. And it is a deep subject, so your reaction was totally valid. Grief has layers, so many layers. And while I'd love to spend hours peeling back those layers, we've got this episode. So we're narrowing it down by connecting grief to something that seems opposite, but is really deeply intertwined, and that is hope. Now, I've been on a year-long journey with hope. I've been exploring what it really is, how to hold it, what it feels like to lose it, and even what it means to withhold it from ourselves. I quite literally have a tattoo of hope because that's how important it's become in my life. I think this conversation can be very poetic, but I always want things to feel grounded. And so I want us to talk about grief and hope and what it actually does to our brains, how we can process grief, no matter how small, and how we can practice hoping, no matter how large. I have found that you can hope big and you can hope small. And your life looks drastically different depending on how much you hope. And we know that the creative life is full of hope. It's full of dreams and wishes and what ifs. And we're constantly imagining new futures, pitching projects, showing up for auditions, dreaming up stories, sculptures, songs, and shows. And every time we do that, we are investing hope. And hope, by definition, is a feeling of expectation and desire for a certain thing to happen. So whether it is hoping for a callback, a grant approval, a moment of peace, or your favorite ice cream to be at the bodega, hope is literally everywhere. It's essential because without it, life turns gray and bland. The creative process is the same. It's fueled by hope. Without it, your creativity might stall, might feel flat. Now, what sucks is that hoping over and over again without seeing results is exhausting. It wears on you. The cycle of getting your hopes up only to watch them fall, it can make you stop wanting to hope entirely because the crash hurts. And after a while, it starts to feel safer not to hope at all. So we shift, we grind, we stop dreaming, and we start pushing. We bury our feelings in the name of the dream, and then we burn out. The dream starts to feel hollow, and we're left wondering, why doesn't it feel worth it anymore? That is when the callousness sets in. You start to harden, not because you want to, but because you have to survive the constant rejection and disappointment. But that hardening comes with a cost. Because when you block out the pain, you also block out the joy. You end up stuck in the middle, never too high and never too low. You just end up existing. But we can find ways to live fully, to feel deeply without being consumed, to grieve and still hope at the same time. And that's why for this episode, I brought on someone I really trust, someone I brag about, honestly, all the time in my day-to-day life because she is brilliant. Dr. DaJonitta Richmond is a mental health physician who specializes in psychiatry and emotional wellness. She has her own private practice called Wholeness Mental Health, and I love what she says about it.
I help people overcome mental health challenges. I help them heal. I help them through their healing journey, whether it's relational disappointment, whether it's depression, anxiety, whether it's something like bipolar disorder. I really help people become whole. So my practice is called Wholeness Mental Health because I just am on a mission to help as many people as possible recover all their broken parts so that they can be whole.
And yes, if you're watching this, you just saw her pop up on the screen and then disappear. This episode is a mix, part interview with Dr. Richmond and my own solo research and reflection. So you'll see her and hear her pop up every now and then throughout the episode as we unpack the relationship between grief and hope, what it does to our minds, our bodies, and our creativity. Let's get into it. So you may be wondering where the topic of grief went, and I promise I'm circling back, okay? I had to set up hope first, because when we decide to hope and we feel that disappointment because something doesn't work out the way we wanted it to, we tend to move on without ever really addressing that disappointment. A lot of people called it hope deferred, right? Or unfulfilled hope. And we know as creatives that this lifestyle means that you face a lot of rejections and a lot of no's. And that means you're facing a lot of disappointment, which means we should be grieving all the time. And yet, many of us aren't. We slap cute sayings like, "What's meant for you won't pass you by," over some serious wounds that we have. And over time, those wounds get bigger and bigger, and the grief builds up more and more. And the crazy thing is, if you don't grieve, your brain doesn't just move on. It adapts. It literally rewires itself around the pain you are avoiding. When we don't let ourselves grieve or even acknowledge the disappointment, we don't just get over it. Our brains actually store that pain in survival mode. The part of your brain called the amygdala, which is your fear and threat detector, holds on to it. It essentially says, "Cool, got it. This rejection hurt. Let's never go there again." So it's no wonder that we feel blocked creatively and disconnected from people, or like we're always bracing, waiting for something bad to happen. Your body stays in this low-level fight or flight state because it's pumping cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and adrenaline into your system. And over time, you might feel numb, easily triggered, exhausted, or just not like yourself. And it's not because you're broken. It's because your brain is protecting you from a wound you haven't given yourself permission to heal. And the worst part is that unprocessed grief can start to shape how you see yourself, your work, and even your future. The hippocampus, your brain's memory center, struggles to file that experience correctly, which can literally warp how you remember events, yourself, or other people, and it affects your self-worth and your trust. So you may think you're being resilient by pushing through, but really your creativity, your clarity, and your capacity for connection are all taking a hit. Grieving isn't a weakness. It's literally neural integration. It's how you bring your brain back online after heartbreak, disappointment, or loss. It's how you clear your space for new stories and new vision. Now, grieving, at least to me, has felt like a big act. And no one really teaches how to grieve properly. And when I say properly, I mean in a healthy way. I think the media has shown grief in its extreme and unhealthy state. For example, getting drunk and yelling at someone on the street. But I asked Dr. Richmond what grieving as a creative could look like. And here's what she said.
Number one, I would say address it. Right. One thing that we can do, especially as a creative person, is we can tend to just have this momentum, just keep going. And I think you spoke about this before. Like some people are like, well, it's okay. And not even acknowledging that, hey, I actually am disappointed. Hey, there was something that I really wanted and I didn't get it. And it's impacting me emotionally. And so just acknowledging it and letting yourself feel the feelings, I would say is one of the most important things that you could do. I try not to put a timeline on grieving because sometimes we would just perpetuate like unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And so I don't want to say that you should give yourself a timeline to get over it, but you should recognize that as you're processing it and as you're sitting in those feelings, how is that impacting you? If you're feeling heavier, if it's getting harder, if you feel yourself progressively getting sadder or less functional because of what you're doing with over time, then I would say, okay, that's kind of a red flag. I would want us to be able to, while you're grieving, even still be able to tap in to creativity. So if you find yourself just not even being you, then you would want to reach out for additional help.
I want to pause in the middle of her advice to say, it does not make you weak to ask for help. It actually makes you smart. You are not an expert in mental health. And though the things we learn about ourselves, from other people, from self-help books, from podcasts, can really be helpful, there will come a point when you will be out of your depth when it comes to the knowledge around mental health. And asking for help from an expert is a great step to take. That is why I'm proud to partner with Salt River Therapy. Their team of thoughtful, affirming therapists work with individuals and couples navigating anxiety, grief, identity questions, and all the real stuff life likes to throw at us. Whether you're looking for in-person sessions in Brooklyn or virtual therapy across New York and New Jersey, Salt River is a beautiful place to start. And yes, you can schedule a free consultation to see if it's a good match. No pressure, just genuine human connection. Head to saltrivertherapy.com to get started today. Okay, so back to what Dr. Richmond was saying about processing grief.
Whatever is your industry, your area, using the time of grieving and even pain to even produce. I think that is so powerful, and some of the most wonderful art can come through a place where you're dealing with emotions and pain. So even producing with that, but also giving yourself time to actually process through it. And then also talking to others. I think that that's one of the most beneficial things, because so much, especially in social media world, let's just say people who do a lot of creativity via social media. Yes, you're expressing yourself, and yes, you're connecting with others, but it's not very intimately connecting, right? And so having your community and actually being able to have somebody share space with you where you can sit with and talk to and just be your vulnerable self. I think that that's everything. I think that grief actually is processed the best in the presence of people that you really care about.
I just want to touch on this topic of community for a second. Did you know that being in safe and supportive community literally helps calm your amygdala? That's the part of your brain that's constantly searching or scanning for fear and danger. When you're grieving, that part can go into overdrive. But human connection, real, grounded, emotionally safe connection, activates your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and restore mode. It helps bring your body down from the stress and adrenaline that's flooding your system when you're in pain. Now get this. Something as simple as eye contact or a gentle touch can release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, and it literally softens the edges of pain. It tells your body you are not alone and you are safe now. And honestly, one of the most healing things I've experienced in community is when people speak life over me. When they say the truth out loud that I can't access in that moment. That kind of presence is sacred. That kind of truth-telling is medicine. Because here's the thing, we forget our feelings are not facts. They're not the truth. They're information. They're your body's way of trying to process what you're going through. So yes, we should listen to them. Let them be red flags or signals that something needs our attention, but we shouldn't build our worldview around them. Don't let temporary emotions shape permanent beliefs. That's what isolation does. It traps you in the echo chamber of your own pain. You sit alone with your grief, your feelings, your thoughts, and eventually you start looping. You start believing those emotions as truth, that you're worthless, that you're alone, that you're never going to reach your dream, that it's always going to feel like this. And it's not. Community disrupts that loop. It reminds you what's real. It gives your brain the safety it needs to begin healing, and your spirit the hope to imagine something beyond the grief. Now, you may be wondering how long you should grieve or the typical amount of time someone should grieve. And to that question, I'm going to let Dr. Richmond answer.
Again, if it's like days or weeks where you're not feeling better after getting these things out and being around people that you love, that's when I would say it could be kind of like an abnormal grieving period. And it actually could be attaching to other things. So the thing about disappointment is that you might have one thing in life that happens, right? You're disappointed about, let's just say, a show, since that's what you mentioned earlier, Brianna. So maybe you're disappointed you didn't get the role in a show. But if you have unresolved disappointment from the past, that disappointment can actually be attaching to other disappointment, and it will be heavier for you because you have just been suppressing those feelings rather than processing them. And so if it's heavier, 9 times out of 10, it's that disappointment has now attached to some unresolved disappointment, and you really need to get some support for that. You really need to do grief counseling or grief therapy, because that can be so helpful.
Most people don't ever acknowledge how much emotions can build up. Like, truly. We don't ever realize how much we're carrying until it starts spilling sideways. We think we're fine, we push through, we stay busy, but those unprocessed emotions, they don't just disappear, they build up. And that build up, that's where triggers come from. That's where trauma hides. And it's not always one big thing. Sometimes it's a slow layering of grief and disappointment we never gave ourselves the space to feel. And here's what happens when we store that up. We start to get callous, emotionally, spiritually, and even creatively. And that part of you that used to feel deeply and hope easily, dream wildly, that part starts to shut down. As I've said before, hope is essential, not just for art, but for a thriving life, for vision, for movement, for connection. When we stop letting ourselves hope because we're afraid of being disappointed again, our world starts shrinking. You might find that your life doesn't look or feel the way you imagined or want it to. You might stop getting excited about things that you used to love. You might feel numb when new opportunities come your way, like you're just going through the motions, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And that is simply because you're carrying too much for too long without a place to set it down, without grieving, without letting someone witness it with you. And here's the truth: what we don't feel, we store. And what's stored in silence eventually surfaces, whether it looks like burnout, a breakdown, blocks, or bitterness. So no, the goal isn't to avoid pain or pretend you're unaffected. That's not what mental health is. The goal is to have the capacity to move through it, to feel, to process, to release, so you can create space for hope again, for joy, for the life and work you actually want. So you might be thinking, this sounds great. I really want to do that. But what are practical ways that I can actually make that happen? Here's what Dr. Richmond says.
How our brain and our body operates, we can tell it that it's small, but it processes stress the same. It processes like agony and emotional distress the same, the emotional dysfunction of it all the same. That's why it's so important to actually process through it, because we can try to convince ourselves that it's not a big deal, but our hearts and our minds and our brains will still carry the weight of it. And so acknowledging it and actually sitting with it and being honest with yourself about what you were longing for and what you were hoping for is so fundamental to actually processing and grieving well. You have to know like the unique things about you to understand what's going to be helpful for you, right? And also understanding how is grief actually impacting my body. So number one, it would be like listening to your body. I love telling people this because everybody responds differently. Like you could be dealing with disappointment and you want to stay in bed all day, while another person can respond to disappointment by being extremely anxious and anxiety and feeling low and depressed. They operate differently in the body. So the response to helping that would be very different. So for example, if I'm just highly anxious, worried about what's going to happen, worried about how am I going to, now make all these changes since I was so forward thinking and I put a lot of things in motion, but then the deal that I was hoping for didn't follow through, and I'm dealing with a high level of anxiety in my body. And so then the response to a high level of anxiety would be more decompression. So you need restfulness. You need to be in an environment where you can focus on something else. You need to decompress. You don't need a lot of stimulation because that's actually going to make it worse. And so recognizing how am I actually responding to this disappointment? What is my body demanding? A lot of times it's going to be restfulness, especially as creatives. You tend to be in production mode all of the time. And so your brain is trained to just constantly be on the go. Your brain is, a bit hyperactive because you're always producing. You're looking at life like everything is content. I must produce everything. And so you're always on the go. And so dealing with disappointment or like an emotional blow, the response to that would be, wow, let me take a step back. Let me actually, rather than staying in my house all day and doing the things that I typically do so that my body's responding because it's trained to respond to environmental cues, let me go somewhere else so I can slow down. Maybe walking in nature, right? Maybe going somewhere and just having a different atmosphere and environment. I think that is so crucial whenever you're trying to overcome any type of emotional blow, especially if you're carrying a lot of anxiety. So disconnecting and giving yourself a break. And so I think that journaling is great. I love that, being able to write down all your thoughts, being honest about what you're going through. And then after, because sometimes people kind of look at journaling like I'm just going to express myself. I think that's great. That's kind of like the first stage of journaling. Express yourself, get everything out, say what happened, but then go back and take a look and analyze and look for goodness. I like to say this. after you see everything that happened, how can you identify how this could be helpful for you? Because yes, you can be going through disappointment, but ultimately everything, I like to look at everything as a part of a growth journey. So how can you learn maybe from what you went through, or what can you take in that season of your life, or maybe you're waiting for that thing, and continue to let it add value in the next goal or the next project. So really taking a moment to identify the good from what you had to go through. Mention community. So not isolating, because a lot of times when we're dealing with a lot of emotions, especially disappointment, we want to pull back, especially people who are, out there in social media creating all the time. Influential people, we want to just kind of isolate. We don't want to be around others, but it can be dangerous to do that. So having your close knit circle that you can actually be in relationship to and in close proximity so they can support you would be everything.
Okay, pause. Did we just catch everything that she just gave us? That wasn't just conversation. That was a checklist for grieving well. Like real grounded practices that help you move through disappointment, not just suppress it or speed past it. So let's break that down. You want to zoom out. Don't stay zoomed in on the pain. Widen the lens. Ask yourself, what have I still gained through this process? What's still true despite the disappointment? This helps shift your brain out of tunnel vision and into perspective. You need to identify the good. Actively look for the good that came from the experience, not in a toxic positive way, but in a grounding, regulated way. Because I know I am someone who looks at the negative, and you have to know that about yourself. Are you a pessimist? Are you an optimist? And so you need to make sure you're looking at the good and the bad. If you are an optimist, then maybe you need to take a second to think about what you have lost. Maybe you're just, what's meant for me won't pass me by. You're saying all the mantras, you're getting all the post-audition treats and treating yourself with self-care to get over it, and you're not actually processing the bad that happened. Or you are only focusing on the bad, and that's something that I do, and you're not actually looking at the good that came from the situation, what you learned through this journey. And so sometimes you have to ask yourself, what am I grateful for even in this moment? You need to celebrate the wins, big or small. Don't minimize progress. Celebrating what is working helps retrain your mind and your body to recognize peace and possibility. Let community hold you accountable to hope. If you don't see the good, let someone else see it for you. If you don't see the bad, let someone else see it for you. If you don't see what you learned, let someone else see it for you. Let your people speak into your disappointment so it doesn't become your identity. Write it all down or say it in a voice memo. Journaling, not just the pain, but the process. What happened? What are you feeling? What might be good in here too? You're not just venting, you're reframing. That is healing. One of the hardest parts of being a creative is grieving a future you imagined, a project that didn't land, a dream role you didn't get, a vision of your life you were holding on to with everything you had. Sometimes we're mourning things that never even happened that we're supposed to, right? And so we're in this kind of multiverse when we dream up ideas. Yes, that is a Marvel reference. Because your brain automatically goes to, oh my gosh, if I take this job, then my whole world can change and my income would increase and maybe I'd move to a different state from a week from now. That's how the creative life goes. It is so unpredictable with the way that it can change and impact your life. And so we start dreaming of all these things. And then when it doesn't happen, we're caught in a pain, and it's easy to check out of the present, to go numb. We can be in the future, right? We can always be dreaming up new things and having creative moments where we're just continually hoping and imagining and all the things. And that is wonderful. That is such a part of the creative lifestyle. But sometimes it can be really hard to be in the present. And that means you never take the time to heal because you're always forward thinking. And so I asked Dr. Richmond some ways that we can make sure we're being present and still have our creativity and our hope running wild. And so she gave a couple of ways, and sadly our audio cut out while we were recording. And so I'm going to read out what she said and sent me. So you want to retrain your mind to get used to practicing awareness. You want to have good boundaries. Let your mind have a specific time of day when it's in its highest productivity, and then having a time where you push creativity away, where you rest, relax, and restore, where you can shut down and have your brain stop utilizing adrenaline, a time to decompress, doing routine things like dimming the lights, having soothing music on, going for a walk, having a hot shower for relaxed muscles, so your body can be relaxed, resting, and restoring. Another great thing to do is to place a demand on your mind for strategic focus and attention. A simple word search or a puzzle with music on, you start to use the part of your brain that is used for executive function. And when this is used, it's easier to be present in the moment. Even if it's just for 10 minutes, this is a great tool to use. She also recommends that as you're winding down to enter that restful space, you should call a friend or someone you really care about, cousins, parents, and ask them how their day was, because it's really hard to be detached and listen at the same time. This allows you to practice the art of being still, and listening to someone and connecting with them is a really great way to ground you in the present moment. I feel like this episode was full of so many little nuggets and so many things that, when implemented, can be really impactful. I think a lot of times with mental health tools, we don't actually put them into practice and we just keep gaining knowledge but never actually doing anything with it. And so if you want to actually grieve this, please do the work. Do the things, because the first step is learning the knowledge. The next one is actually doing something with it. And before we close, I just want to give a huge heartfelt thank you to Dr. Richmond for sharing her wisdom, her gentleness, her insight with us today. If you felt seen or supported by anything she shared, please go follow her and stay connected to her work. She's doing such wonderful and powerful things in the mental health space, especially for creatives and those navigating complex emotional journeys. Everything connected to her will be linked in the description box, but you can find her at wholenessmentalhealth.com. And as always, thank you for being here. I'm so happy to learn with you. I'm so happy to grow with you. And I will see you on the next episode of Suffering for Art. Yay!